Well, quite frankly, if I knew that, I would be a hedge fund manager and hope that I'm like Michael Burry and the Big Short guy and make billions of dollars by timing that, but I'm not. So I will tell you, it's very hard to know. It could be tomorrow, it could be next year, it could be never. I think is unlikely. So the bigger question is not when the bubble will pop, but what might cause the bubble to pop, and what are the less obvious things that might cause the bubble to pop. And that's what I think is useful to talk about today. Let's talk about one thing that's actually happened not quite about 9 months ago, which was algorithmic efficiency. Algorithmic efficiency came when DeepSeek came out, and that actually caused a big drop in the stock market, as everybody may recall. And what they did is they trained a new model that seemed to be as good as the existing models for a fraction of the cost. And just a few weeks ago, they came out with another model that came out with, 50, 70% less cost of inferencing, of reading, of answering questions. So these iterations are common in the tech industry, where you have discontinuities of technology moving forward, and that can really change the structure of how the industry works. So that would be one big potential trigger, would be further algorithmic efficiency improvements that really change the dynamics. The second thing that might really cause a bubble to pop would be the realization that the capex being spent across the industry is simply not sustainable by the revenue being generated by the industry. Estimates would say maybe there's $300 to $400 billion of revenue required to pay for the capex that's being put to work in 2025. And yet the measurement, again, it's hard to know because these are private companies, but the measurement of industry income is on the order, revenue is on the order of tens of billions. So you've got somewhere between 20 and 30x gap between actual revenue coming in and the revenue required to service the amount of capital that's being spent. So that would be the second thing. The third thing, which I think is maybe even the most important, is that enterprises are not really interested in things that are usually right. They want answers that are actually right. They want answers that are fast, accurate, and precise. And large language models, as we all know, are usually right, but not always. We actually have to be kind of on our toes to make sure that the answer we're getting back from an LLM is in fact not a hallucination. So if you're a CFO and you ask a question, you want that answer to be correct. Well, what happens if enterprises determine that the way to get correct answers is, rather than using a big, huge, large language model, to use these small and medium models that are starting to be put into trials? And if that starts to percolate out through the world, then people are going to really question whether the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of dollars being put into training these, whatever, a dozen or so large language models are out there today, will actually ever matter relative to enterprise revenue. For consumer revenue, fine, but for enterprise, it could be that that will be determined to be a unsustainable expenditure of money relative to what the actual need is in the enterprise, which would be these highly tuned small and medium models. So those are the three things that I think are not spoken about enough that could be precipitating a bubble pop sometime in the future at a time that I can't tell you when it is. Well, I think the first obvious winner here will be the people that are making the infrastructure and tools that are in fact tuned to what the enterprises need, to my third point around the bubble pop. So the enterprises need these small and medium language models that are maybe trained inside of their own firewalls, on their own data, that are much more accurate than the LLMs that still hallucinate a bit. Well, the people that are building those, those tools and infrastructure components to deliver the enterprise need, I think they stand to win pretty nicely. So that would be the first one. The second winner is going to be the people that are really at the application and service layer, Not the infrastructure and tools, but the applications of any of these models are going to all of a sudden have access to all the capabilities of the existing big LLMs, of maybe these new emerging small and medium models at a much lower cost, because all this inflated expense or exaggerated amount of money being spent has been determined to be unrealistic at that price. But at some lower price, they can still make use of it. So if you're building apps and services and all of a sudden your API costs come down, your ability to get access to the technologies underneath is lower, then your profitability will go up. The third winner are going to be the hyperscalers that have other revenue to support them through a downturn or a winter, whatever you want to call it. So if you're a Microsoft, if you're an Oracle, you're an Amazon, you're a Google, frankly, you have a cash cow business, which is your cloud business. And if that cloud business is printing money and you're putting a whole bunch of that money into this LLM infrastructure and training technology that ends up being overly spent, well, yeah, so you lost 6 months of your profits. So it goes. You have a pile of money still coming in next year that maybe your stocks go down for a little bit, but ultimately those companies are still going to prevail. And maybe they'll even be able to buy at fire sale some of the independent companies that couldn't survive. They will be able to buy those companies by the money that was spent, frankly, through venture capital money for the most part, on infrastructure that was not delivering and not performing as an asset. They can buy that and put it to good work. So those are the three, I think, potential categories of winners. I think India stands to benefit from any change that's reducing cost, frankly, because India is a very cost-conscious market, and it's one that requires scale to really succeed. Think about what happened in roughly 2000, 2001 when the telecom bust happened. The cost of international communications came down. There's all that dark fiber that all of a sudden started to be lit up to make the call centers of India, the BPO centers, effectively much more competitive on the global scale because there was effectively zero cost of international communications. And so anytime you have a discontinuity in reducing costs of things, India is going to figure out how to make use of those new lower cost things to apply them at scale, not only to the Indian domestic market, but also to global markets. So that would be my view of India's benefits from a bubble burst.